Hello and welcome back to another episode and a new season of the AIGA Design Podcast, a show that brings inspiration and empowerment to designers as we deal with change and disruption in our careers and in the wider world. My name is Lee-Sean Huang, Senior Director of Learning and Programs here at AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. The theme this season is design and performance. Some of the questions we'll be exploring in episodes this season include how designers can be more effective and influential when performing our professional roles, how designers perform the role of public educator and advocate on social issues like migration, how designers perform our role as facilitators and futurists that help us imagine new technological and social possibilities. These are just a few of the themes we'll be touching on this season. We have shifted to a video podcast format this season as well. You'll continue to be able to find us at AIGA Design, wherever you get audio podcasts. And if you're already watching this on YouTube, hello. In this first episode of the season, we're going to do a replay of the official announcement for the design and performance theme, which is the theme not just for this podcast, but for the entire year of AIGA programming that will culminate in October in Los Angeles at our annual design conference. That's October 9th through 11th in downtown Los Angeles. Following that announcement for the design and performance theme, we'll be airing an interview that we recorded with independent filmmaker Gary Jaffe, who joined us in New York City at the conference after show for the 2024 conference, where we explore more of this theme of design and performance. In the upcoming season of AIGA's national programming, we'll be exploring the intersection of design and performance. Design is all about shaping how we see the world and how the world sees us. How do we make an impression? How do we project designerliness? How do we kick off a meeting? How do we build on each other's ideas? How do we collaborate and create with others? How do we show our work? And how do we give and receive critique? How do we deal with difficult conversations? And how do we close the deal? How do we reveal the right amount of chaos? How do you design for performance? Or how do you perform design? We look forward to continuing the conversation. Special thanks to our partners at Death to Stock for providing the images for this announcement. Hello and welcome to the 2024 AIGA Design Conference After Show. My name is Lee-Sean Huang, Senior Director of Learning and Programs here at AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. I'm here with independent filmmaker Gary Jaffe in New York City to talk about performance, which is the theme of next year's AIGA programming. Starting now, AIGA's programming. We just announced it with a video at the end of the conference. And so I thought it'd be cool to just riff on the meaning of this word, what it means for you in your creative field, and to help designers in our community think about the topic as people start proposing things for next year.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lee-Sean, and to AIGA for having me. It's so exciting to talk about performance, which is, of course, such a meaningful term in both film, where I work now, and theater, where my original background is, and I sometimes still dabble. I think about performance meaning an actor on a stage, performance meaning an actor in front of a camera, and of course, performance meaning me as a leader, as an artist, who is trying to manifest something that is going to express an internal idea of the world that I, dreamt up in my journal one day, and then bring my other artists, my designers, my team members, et cetera, on board to that vision, while also bringing their own vision to the table. So the question is, how do I perform myself in a way that, gets them there? So and gets the product there and gets the audience there in the end.
Yeah, I think maybe to bridge and translate a little bit, like for designers, there's like the performances that we are aware of as performances, right? It's like, okay, I'm going in to present my portfolio in a job interview or to pitch my deck for an investor or for a client. And it's like, okay, you rehearse that, you know that that's a performance. And then there's this other one, sort of more everyday performance of like, I'm a creative director and I have a team and I'm trying to set a vibe for a brand that I'm creating, right? And there's that kind of performance that's maybe more subconscious, or we don't think about it as like a special kind of performance. It's the day-to-day performance of being a creative leader. And I think it's something that you face, on set as a director, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, especially given that a film set is such a limited period of time versus a creative director coming to the job every day. Because on a film set, which really might be 3 days. A feature could be in 2 weeks. I mean, really, we're working with not much in the terms of time resources right now. How do I, in those 3 days that we're all on set together, not only perform the vibe of the film that will then, trickle into what the camera catches, but also make sure that all my team members feel the way that I want them to feel that will contribute to everything arriving at the product. And so, for example, this recent film, this short film called 5-Player Game, which I shot out in the Berkshires at a cabin, I wanted it to feel really nice vibes. And it's really hard to get nice vibes on a film set. You should always try, but they're very, very stressful. I knew it was going to be a hard shoot, but I knew that for this kind of casual, queer comedy that there needed to have a sense of relaxation on set. And so that meant that every time we were on pause, it was about telling jokes. It was about creating camaraderie. It was about checking in with the team members who weren't, busily doing something and didn't want to talk to me, to find more about their lives and their roles, etc. And then this is a very nerdy film, and so at the end of the film shoot, I wrote a thank you note with an X-Men card to every, not a trading card, but a postcard that was the X-Men, to give to every team member, so they felt not only that they were appreciated, but that I knew them, that I had something to say to them, and that they were part of this queer, nerdy comedy process. And that was very well appreciated. I've never gotten an X-Men thank you note on a queer nerd film set before.
And it's like a total brand experience. On another segment of the after show, I was talking with Brendan Murphy, who's a global creative director of Lippincott, which is a huge global branding agency. And he was talking about successful brands being characters, and it's not just the color palette and the logo, but not necessarily personified, but having a vibe, right? And it sounds like a film is a character in that sense, in terms of it has a vibe to it.
Absolutely, and there are so many choices that the director does not make of the film. And, it's fun to talk about auteurs, and it's fun to talk about people like Hitchcock or Wong Kar-wai or whatnot, who have utterly distinct aesthetics in that sense of design. But when you look at the actual mechanism of film, so many people are making so many choices to arrive to a shot, a performance, a moment. And so there was literally no way that I could make all those choices, even if I did have the film expertise, which, by the way, I don't have. I know what I'm good at, and my director of photography's name is Ideal, and at a certain point I joked IDTI, which is I defer to Ideal, which is to say if there is an aesthetic question that I do not know the answer to, I will defer to her, because she is in charge of the camera and she will have a great idea. But that means Ideal has to be with me on the vibe and on the vision. And it means that Ashton, who is the first AC, has to be with Ideal and has to be with me. And so on and so forth down the line, because when Ashton does the rack focus, that tells the story. And when Ideal positions the camera or works with the gaffer on the lighting, that tells the story. And I wrote the story, and so on and so forth. So if everyone is on this vibe train, what do you know? We arrive at the shot that we want. And if that vibe train is off, and I've been on sets where the vibe train has been off and there wasn't a clear sense of purpose, you don't get the product. And then your editor has to save it in post, which the vibe train continues.
I think translating again for designers, it's you could have the most well-documented corporate brand book, right? With okay, this is X number of pixels, it has to be whatever Pantone color, but then there's still room for interpretation, even within that ambiguity, right? Just as you wrote the script and you were directing your own film, and even so, there's just so many hands touching it that there's, you need a different kind of alignment besides what's literally in the script.
Absolutely. Another thing that's useful on that front, and this does go more into aesthetics, is to have a few code words, I might say. And that is someone or something in an aesthetic outside of your film, which you can point to as a benchmark. So for us on this film, we were very inspired by French filmmaker Eric Rohmer, who's kind of having a moment. I'm not sure why, but there's an Instagram called Rohmer Fits, where you just look at all these beautifully dressed French, young people in the 80s and so on and so forth. And that's not to say that that's why we were inspired by Rohmer. I was just inspired by him because of the way that people who are neurotic kind of interacted in a casual way with a beautiful natural setting that really got to some core relationship truth. And that was important to me. And they're fun. Those are fun, nice movies. So my team and I talked about Romero a lot. And when we were setting up shots, we could point to how does this feel? Certain moments in particular, does this feel Romero or not? And that goes to the costume designer, and that goes to the director of photography. And it even goes to, okay, I'm working with the actors to figure out blocking. What is an external that I can tap because I'm tired? Because I've slept very little and I've a little bit run out of ideas at this moment, so I'm gonna let a previous master have an idea. It's not stealing if then you transform it entirely into something new. And that's a Sondheim quote, is that he can point to his, Stephen Sondheim, I know I just jumped from...
Romero to Sondheim.
I just jumped all over the place. Yeah. But Sondheim talks about how in almost all of his compositions, he can point to the things that he stole, but then he buried them and you wouldn't recognize it. But he's like, oh, I steal all the time. Master thief.
Right. Yeah, and I think that applies to designers as well, right? And just like it's everything that we've experienced and our inputs, right, of like our creative diet, and then how do we like regurgitate it? Sounds gross, but like remix it and then put it back out.
Regurgitate or put a spin on it.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it would be boring if I did a Romero film that was just trying to do a Romero film. It's been done. Romero did it.
Yeah.
But if I'm taking, a Romero aesthetic and I'm mixing in these queer nerds who are playing Dungeons and Dragons and also having this more of to make another film reference, an Ingmar Bergman style sex comedy. Bergman is famously bleak, except he did make some very good sex comedies. And I put those two things together, and then I, blow on it my own Gary Jaffe thing.
Yeah.
That product is going to be absolutely distinctive and deeply recognizable as a me thing. And someone might say, oh, that feels like Romero. I'm like, aha, you got it.
Yeah.
But it's not going to feel like just copying someone else's aesthetic.
And I think that's just like a bonus for the film connoisseur who's like, oh, you got it. Good for you. You're smart. I feel like there's another facet of performance that I want to talk about with you, which is like performance in the sense of like business performance, or even like just like how you hit your goal. Like thinking about performance as like how you close the gap between the movie that's in your mind and like the actual movie in the final print, right? And like designers have this as well, creative directors of like, okay, what did you envision? And then you bring this team along with you, and then like, what was the gap? But then sometimes you find stuff along the way. You mentioned Wong Kar-wai, who's very famous for shooting without scripts and putting his actors through all sorts of things to come up with, a masterpiece at the end. But like, yeah, how do you think about that? The kind of unplanned journey versus the like very clear vision, and like how you bridge that?
I think there's a Guillermo del Toro quote where he talks about how early in the process, whatever that initial thing that you grabbed onto that makes you want to make the movie, you must never forget it. Because the process of making a film is going to challenge you at every step of the way. And mind you, you said I'm an independent filmmaker, and boy, is that correct. I've been, lucky in a certain sense that I've been able to, bring my films together on my own accord so that I can make them according to my own tastes. And many other people, Del Toro included, are working with, Hollywood producers and whatnot, and have to deal with an external voice telling them what to do.
That's the trade-off. They get the budget, but they also get all of the other
So
voices.
We'll put that aside for a second and just focus on the idea that early on in the process, you had a kernel of inspiration, and it meant something.
Yeah.
You felt it here. You hold on to that picture, so that at that moment when you're lost and you're not sure what choice to make, or there's a question of whether to cut this line or put it back in or re-scramble the thing, if you have that internal compass of what the initial inspiration was, what the original reason for being, you'll find it again. And when you face challenges, which you invariably will, where something just didn't come through, you can choose how to shift what you've done in order to execute that original vision, even if it was different from the thing that you planned.
Okay, so there is that like kernel of truth, even if it's not like literally like, oh, this, you saw this color in your head and you have to like get it on screen.
Well, part of that is being open to what's there.
Right.
And I mean that in many ways. So for example, there's a scene where, surprise, surprise, these 5 queer nerds are dancing. What do you know? They do this. And in the script, it was only supposed to be 3 of them, but I had put music on and the lights were going and we were getting ready to shoot and all 5 were dancing. And I looked at it, I was like, well, this obviously has to be in the film. This feels like promise of the premise. How could it not be? And Idil was setting up the other shot, and I said, Idil, I think we should shoot this too. She said, well, I shouldn't shoot it like I'm going to shoot this other shot. I should get up there and get in it. It's like, let's do it. And luckily, we had the time in the schedule to make it happen. But what I mean by this is that was not in the original vision. But when I saw it, and it echoed and resounded with that initial reason for being and core idea of what this film should be, then we made sure to get it. And then similarly, if that's a good example of, oh, wow, an opportunity has presented to us and we have to be open to it. Facing a challenge, oh, well, I just didn't get that shot, or, oh, that's a jump cut and I need to fix it, or something was happening in the space on the day. We had fires in Canada that were causing the beautiful blue sky to have a slightly blandish white tone, and I had to be like, well, I can't control that.
Right. It's like,
you don't have
there's only certain so much color correction you can do.
Right. So what are we going to do about that? But then I remembered that for as sunny and green as Romaire's films are, if you look at the skies, they're often kind of a blandish white, which is surprising because his films are very rich, colorful. So I just said to myself, okay, it's intentional. And we're just going to lean in on it being intentional and can push it toward that original core, hey, Romaire's a great aesthetic idea, and we don't have any other choice. So, there it is.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts or points of advice for designers to think about performance, some aspect of this?
I mean, I'm working in film, which is a highly personal art form, and the way I have been taught to work in that medium is to dig deep within for what's honest to my experience of the world and to create from that. I don't know how many designers who are pushing a deadline and trying to get something out that is the portfolio for the job, etc., are working so deeply from that personal place. But I know that on an aesthetic level, on an emotional level, etc., the real core compass is that sense of self. And that also helps me on a design level in terms of how I perform myself, in terms of how I dress or how I show up. Like, I think my aesthetic is a little rumply, it's a little chaotic. I think my hairs might be a little out of place. And that's fine because that, you might call it wabi-sabi, that thing is gonna show up in my work. Totally. Wes Anderson is not a hair out of place,
Right.
And so, and if you look at how he dresses and how he presents himself, that deeply disciplined aesthetic shows up in his self-performance. So I think that the core thing I'm saying here is a sense of self that is core to your artistic creative identity, knowing that self and being willing to let that be and not trying to today I'm going to show up as Wes Anderson. Well, no, I'm never going to show up as Wes Anderson. And if I try to do a Wes Anderson phase, I will probably fail. Ask me in 10 years, maybe I've changed dramatically, but at this point I know myself. I've had 36 years. I just don't think I could pull it off, and I'm not going to try. So in that sense, a designer having a strong sense of what their internal compass is and not trying to compromise it in the spirit of getting something else that someone else wants might be helpful.
I think that's great. It actually connects with a lot of the themes that we've heard in this year's conference, because we've been talking about margins and identity, so all sorts of, whether it's people's ethnic identities as designers, we had a workshop on queering your career, so it was all about point of view and subjectivity, even if we're doing client work, right? It's also how you set yourself apart in a marketplace. So there's a bit of authorship there too, along with the problem solving.
What's funny is I'm planning a wedding right now. Thank you. Yes, to the room. Congratulations are accepted.
This is, which is also a performance, right?
Exactly.
Starring you.
But exactly. No, this is why I'm bringing it up. I'm not just making this, to make a point of it, because it's so easy to compare to other weddings and think, oh, do I need to do this or that, the other? But at the end of the day, we are creating an aesthetic experience that, with the resources that we have available, should feel like us. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be different than someone else's wedding who has different priorities. And you know, in a wedding, you truly are choosing each step of the theatrical and in some ways cinematic experience of moving through this space. So how do you be honest to the thing that reflects you? And how do you see something at someone else's wedding and be like, oh, cute choice for them? And that is so unimportant to me. My partner and I went to 7 weddings last year, so it was kind of a good experience, like,
yeah.
Okay, no, and you know, degrees of fanciness or aesthetic discipline, to use that word again, that works for some people and it doesn't need to work for others. And what we are going to do is going to feel very much like us. And I think it's been helpful to be making movies and putting on a wedding at the same time, because it's really been useful in identifying who I am, how I want people to understand me, and then how I want people to experience my work writ large.
And like just having that freedom, that permission structure for yourself to like challenge whether it's like the social conventions or cultural defaults. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, to take us out, we've been asking our guests, like, what is something that inspires you that you would like to recommend to our audience? It could be like a book, a piece of media, art, whatever you'd like to recommend.
Those who are here in New York City, there is a wonderful cinema called Metrograph, which is on the Lower East Side. And last year, my friend and I just wanted to go see something on a Wednesday evening, didn't know anything, picked a movie called The Aviator's Wife, directed by Eric Romer, walked in, and here I am a year and change later, having made a film that homages this person.
Right.
And that is, I think, the power of not only Metrograph, but any sort of highly designed, cultivated, curated artistic space like Metrograph, Film Forum, IFC, BAM, like all these great movie theaters that we have in New York, where I have memberships because I love them.
Yeah.
To walk in not knowing what you're going to experience and then experience something you never know, it might suddenly become a part of your aesthetic and something that is like a team member. And it can be like that. So what I'm really, you know, pitching to people right now is go to museums, go to the movies.
Yeah.
Like
get out of your normal lane, your normal studio setup. Yeah.
Exactly. And truly, we have so many wonderful experts out there who can cultivate a path for you to follow that is going to educate and enrich you. And I, for as like vain as I am, and as much as I think that I know everything, I'm also very into not knowing anything. Yeah. And so to just show up and let something, even like the Criterion Channel, guide me through an experience of several movies in a row just because of what those curators did, I think it's the best. And I think it comes back to performance and design in that those curators have designed an experience for you, and they've thoughtfully,
or design conference curators.
Exactly. And trust them and respond to them and listen and challenge and have an experience, because what a great way to experience yourself than to experience a journey that was, you know, paved for you by people who know the work and love it and love you experiencing it.
Well, thank you so much for the conversation, Gary.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The After Show.